Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my personal memories for one of my favorite video game consoles of all time, the Nintendo GameCube. Look at this, I still have my beautiful little purple lunchbox of joy right here with me. Today I'm going to be talking straight from the heart. The GameCube was an interesting console for Nintendo. In many respects, it was their last quote-unquote traditional console with just a traditional control scheme. It was just sort of a no-nonsense, no gimmicks, just a really solid, great gaming console with a plethora of fantastic games. And yet, it wasn't that successful when it first came out. In fact, with the exception of the Wii U, it was Nintendo's least successful home gaming console. It was succeeded by the massively popular Nintendo Wii and preceded by the revolutionary Nintendo 64. And the GameCube was just sort of right there in the middle, sort of the end of an era of Nintendo, right before the start of another era for Nintendo. The Nintendo GameCube released in 2001. It was right after 9/11, and it came around the same time as the PlayStation 2, which was a massive phenomenon with games like Grand Theft Auto and Final Fantasy X, as well as Microsoft's newest console being the Xbox, which was really making a lot of headway with the multiplayer first-person shooter games like Halo, and eventually with games like Knights of the Old Republic. And the GameCube seemed to put a lot of customers off due to its more kiddie or kid-friendly appearance and some of its more colorful, quote-unquote, cartoony looking games. I personally think this is all bullcrap reasons to like or dislike a game. What the game looks like is no indicator of its actual quality, but nonetheless, this was just how it worked. Market forces, unfortunately, at the time, didn't really give the GameCube the chance it deserved. That's not to say it wasn't still successful in its own right. It had a large following and had many really great games, probably the most notable being Super Smash Bros. Melee, which continues to be played in tournaments to this day. But I want to talk about my personal Nintendo GameCube memories. The Nintendo GameCube was the very first Nintendo home console I ever owned. I was 10 years old in 2002 when, on Christmas morning, I expected to get a few things. I got a copy of the Spider-Man DVD, and I got a cool wooden sword so I could pretend to be Link, because at the time I was really into Zelda Ocarina of Time, having borrowed a neighbor's Nintendo 64, and really that's what really got me into wanting a GameCube, was being able to play games like Zelda and Smash Brothers and wanting to have a console like this for myself. But I did not expect in a million years, as much as I hoped they would get it for me, that I would get a Nintendo GameCube. Yet when we went down and looked by the Christmas tree that fateful Christmas morning, walked right into the living room, me and my brothers and sister go in there, and the first thing that catches our eye is a giant box that reads, Nintendo GameCube. I was so excited, I had to pinch myself for days on end, be like, wow, we actually have a Nintendo GameCube in our household. I've never been more excited on Christmas Day in my life to get a present. I don't suspect I ever will be. Just that childlike joy and wonder of getting something that you would never expect to have in a million years. Yet there it was, the Nintendo GameCube. And not only that, but each of us got a Nintendo GameCube game. My sister got Animal Crossing, my oldest brother got Super Mario Sunshine, my middle brother got Metroid Prime, and for me, the magnum opus, Super Smash Bros. Melee. And we played Super Smash Bros. Melee all day that Christmas Day, and for many days, weeks, and yes, months to come. I was obsessed with the Nintendo GameCube. It opened so many doors, just thinking of all these new games I was going to get. I remember at the time having just played Zelda for the first time, and when I saw ads for the new Zelda game, The Wind Waker, and while it looked kind of weird, I was still nonetheless excited that there was going to be a Zelda game on the GameCube. I remember seeing Donkey Kong Racing in an outdated ad and actually going to Toys R Us asking if they had it, only to find out that it had been canceled because, frankly, I wasn't really in the know and had no idea that Donkey Kong Racing had already been canceled like a year earlier, but what have you. And I remember renting games like Star Fox Adventures, the game based off of the first Spider-Man movie, Sonic Adventure 2 Battles. I remember my brother for his birthday that year got the James Bond game Agent Under Fire, and I remember playing quite a bit of that in multiplayer. What's weird is that there's so many GameCube games that I continuously just played the first level of over and over and over again at the time, and never really progressed or saved my game, but just always booted up the game and just played the first level, the first area. This was true across multiple games like Metroid Prime, Super Mario Sunshine, James Bond, Agent Under Fire, so many more. It was crazy. In many cases, some of these games I didn't really fall in love with until later. A prime example of that being, well, Metroid Prime, which when I first played it, I thought it looked really cool and it played really cool, and I just kept playing that first level, the friggin' Orpheon, over and over and over again, and yet never progressing it, never even beating the Parasite Queen until a few years later. And then I finally got into the game and realized how amazing it was, and I beat the freaking game. It was I that ended up falling in love with Metroid, not my brother, who was the one that actually wanted the game for Christmas. I'm the one that ended up being a massive Metroid fan from there on out. Gosh, I remember for my 11th birthday having a birthday slumber party and playing Super Smash Bros. Melee and just having a blast. I also remember one of our other family friends coming over, and this was at the height of like Lord of the Rings. I was obsessed with Lord of the Rings, and he brought over his Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers game, and we played that on the GameCube. Just, oh my god, so many memories. It's like being able to tell people when I went back to school after Christmas break, oh my god, I got a GameCube for Christmas. I felt like one of the cool kids saying that for the first time in ever. Even though most of them had an Xbox or PlayStation, I was just like, yeah, I have a GameCube and I'm not ashamed of that. Yeah. I loved the GameCube. I remember throughout most of middle school, even when I got a PlayStation 2, I still gravitated towards the GameCube after a while. And while I still love, don't get me wrong, I love the PlayStation 2, there was just something about the GameCube. It's sort of, and while the PlayStation 2 had more games on it, and I might probably even owned more games on it, the games on the GameCube, I just wanted to go back and play more, with a few exceptions. The games like Metroid Prime and The Wind Waker and Smash Bros. Melee especially, just, there was no comparison for me. It's quality over quantity, man. And yet the GameCube had so many more in quantity than I think it's given credit for. Just based off exclusives alone, it just pounded the competition into the dust by and large. Yeah, there were some great games on the PlayStation 2, like Final Fantasy X and Shadow of the Colossus and stuff, but for me, games like Metroid Prime, a game I can play decades down the road, I don't even need a remastered version, much as I would very much like one, to just have a blast at that game. It's what other consoles besides Nintendo makes games that are so freaking timeless? None really come to mind. So now I've sort of gushed enough about my love for the GameCube, and I do love my GameCube. I have a lot of, I know people hate the word, I have a lot of nostalgia with this little purple lunchbox, and I still play this game and have an absolute blast with the games on the system. So now I want to get to the next part of my video where I talk about my top 5 favorite Nintendo GameCube games. I had to think quite a lot about this, and I wanted to narrow it down to A, games that were exclusives to the GameCube when they released. I mean, obviously some of these games have been ported since, but all these games at the time in the generation were GameCube exclusives, and B, only one game per franchise. So I had to narrow myself down and really had to think about this, but I think that actually made my list of my top 5 favorite GameCube games pretty diversified, and I think you'll see why. Starting off, Animal Crossing. Yes, the first game. Nowadays, everyone's crazy about Animal Crossing New Horizons. Back in the era of the GameCube, there had never really been a life simulator game on a Nintendo console. Sure, you had SimCity, but in this game, you know, you're just sort of part of your own little neighborhood. You're just doing menial tasks, and yet somehow it built a cult following. And this is another one of those games that I played it a little bit, but I didn't really get into it a lot at first. But after a while, I just got kind of hooked to it, you know? The game just had some, you know, irreplicable charm to it. Everything from, like, the musical jingles to the sound effects of the characters' mouths, to the, just the season changes, to just sort of the overall design of the world and the small yet very much variety of characters in the game. It just, I don't know, it just had a very homely, just sort of wholesome feel to it. This is a game I spent quite a bit of time with. While I never fully paid off my loan on my house, I nevertheless loved visiting my neighbors, loved seeing Tom Nook and seeing what shenanigans he wanted me to do, going to the police department run by a bulldog, seeing Cap'n, the little frog that takes you to a mysterious island. Heck, even being chastised by Mr. Resetti, you know, in a weird way, I always kind of enjoyed when I didn't save my game. Yeah, Animal Crossing is very much a game that I have periodically gone back to, not as much as the other games on my list, but nonetheless, this is one of my top 5 GameCube games, and a game that I still very much enjoy revisiting every so often. Number 4, Mario Kart Double Dash. In terms of just pure gameplay mechanically, I think this is my favorite Mario Kart game. While Mario Kart 8 Deluxe might be the most refined game, I love this game's use of co-op, how you can play 2-on-2 players. I just love the stage variety. I love the physics of this game. I love everything about this game almost. I love just how every level is so different and unique. I love this game's iteration of Rainbow Road, even though I hate Rainbow Road. I love the character variety. I love DK Mountain. I love the Dry Desert. I just love the gameplay mechanics, as I mentioned already. Having 2 players play co-op against another 2 players co-op. I really wish they'd bring that back in a future Mario Kart title. The battles mode in this game is phenomenal. This was really my go-to multiplayer game for months and months and months on end after I got it. And to this day, I don't think I've ever had so much fun with a Mario Kart title. Number 3. This is probably the game I have by far the strongest memories of and have by far put the most hours into. Super Smash Bros. Melee. Right off the bat, this was the game I was most excited to play on the Nintendo GameCube, and it did not disappoint. While I had played it once renting a GameCube about a year earlier from my older brother's birthday party, now I really got to sink my teeth into this game. I got to play all the characters, play all the levels. I got to try out all these characters from franchises that I had almost no idea from. I got to really get into characters like Ganondorf even, admittedly a very slow, clunky character, but as I was, you know, Zelda fever at the time, I really wanted to play all these Zelda characters. I got to play characters like Marth and learn about Fire Emblem. And most importantly, I got to come up with so many neat matches to sort of replicate battles, either from Nintendo games that I had already played or from just cool ideas for battles in a Nintendo crossover game. And along with that, just the multiplayer component of this game. You know, I admittedly sucked at this game at first, but over time I really managed to hold my own and really get a step up against my siblings in rematches. Sweet redemption, I say. Yeah, this is easily the most fast-paced Smash Bros. Game to date, and this is a game that is just so polished, even on the GameCube. Like, the character models are so top-notch, the attention to detail is so beautiful. Masahiro Sakurai really brought his A-game to this Super Smash Bros. Sequel, and while Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is still my favorite, this game is just the most nostalgic to me. And I'm sorry, this game is still an absolute blast to play, and yeah, this game's just a freaking classic. And I love it, and I definitely, once the pandemic winds down, I intend to have some classic Melee parties at my place. So, come on by. Or don't. Number 2. Alright, we're down to the last 2. These last 2 games are easily the most special games on the GameCube for me, and the games that are both absolutely some of my favorite video games of all time. Number 2 is The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Like everybody, I was a little weirded out by the art style of The Wind Waker, and I remember when I went to look for a new game at Best Buy, I saw that they had the Ocarina of Time and the Ocarina of Time Master Quest just sitting on the store shelf at the Best Buy, and I was like, yes, that's the game I'm going to get. Because that was the Zelda game that I first played on the Nintendo 64, and if you see my previous Zelda video, you know how much I loved and love Ocarina of Time. And that's actually the Zelda game that I spent the most time playing on my GameCube, even though it was an N64 game. Eventually I got a 64 with an original Zelda 64 cartridge, but that's beside the point. The point is, Wind Waker at first, I just seemed like whatever. It's like, at the time, I was really only interested in that one Zelda game, Ocarina of Time, and didn't really care about Wind Waker. I remember renting it a little bit and thinking it seemed cool, but not really being that invested in it. I liked the being able to roll around on the island. I liked the free roaming camera, 360-degree camera, definitely. And while I wasn't as weirded out as the art style as some, I still kind of missed the more, at the time, what seemed to be the more realistic look of Ocarina of Time. But for my 11th birthday, I got The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, and I finally got to play this game, and I fell in love. I'm not going to say it happened to me right away. I got through the Forsaken Fortress and had fun with it. You know, I got to the first dungeon on Dragon Roost Island. I loved, of course, the theme of Dragon Roost Island. But it wasn't until I beat the first boss of the Dragon Roost Cavern, Goma, which admittedly took me months to beat because I kind of sucked at games at the time and wasn't really used to Zelda boss battle formulas. But after I did that, and as soon as I made it to the Forest Haven, I just fell in love with this game, and I did not want to put it down. And then I went from loving to this game to absolutely adoring it when I got to the Tower of the Gods. Just the sense of magic, the sense of wonder, the sense of just ancientness that this game purveyed. Just the scope, the epicness, coming from like a game like Ocarina of Time, which, you know, had a Hyrule feel that I absolutely loved running around in, but nevertheless, I always knew at the time, yeah, this is clearly not actually what the developers envisioned this game to look like. However, the Great Sea, oh my god, this felt like a real living, breathing world at the time. It was so much more just grand in scope and immersive. And yeah, while admittedly it was a little bit empty, and while yes, the sailing could get a little bit annoying near the end towards the Triforce quest, I nevertheless eventually kind of just fell in love with sailing around on the sea. You know, at the time I was a kid, I had a lot more patience, and you know, playing the ballad that lets you change the direction of the wind, didn't really think much of it at the time. And even the dreaded Triforce hunt, I kind of enjoyed at the time, the first playthrough, because it sort of gave me an excuse to just sort of take in everything in the world and just sort of feel like a last sort of hurrah before the final battle. And oh boy, the final battle and the ending of this game is one of the most bittersweet, poignant moments in any video game I have played. And even playing it as an adult, it really feels like it expresses a sentimentality, yet an importance of growing up and, eventually moving on, and just an important message that I feel like I appreciate even more when I played it as an adult. And oh my god, the combat in this game, just such an improvement over the previous 3D Zelda games. So many more sword moves, having like a parry move, being able to knock off enemies' opponents, and just how cool it looks. Oh my gosh, that with the variety of weapons, the absolutely massive boss battles, and the legendary soundtrack. Oh my god, the soundtrack in the Wind Waker is just timeless. Yeah, this game is just an absolute gem. And while admittedly it has plenty of flaws, I'm not saying no Zelda game's perfect, it's still an outstanding game and easily one of my favorite Zelda games and just one of my favorite games, period. Now, number 1. The Big Kahuna. The Crystal Coconut. If you've seen the Donkey Kong Country cartoon. The Creme de la Creme. The Big Cheese, the Big Shot, the GameCube game that for me defines the GameCube like no other game and defines that era of gaming like no other game. One of my top 3 favorite games of all time, the one and only Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime, this was a no-brainer. This was my first 3D Metroid game, and yet even when I go back and play the previous Metroid games and then go back and play this game, I'm just astounded by just how flawlessly they transitioned this game into 3D on the first try. This is not just a Metroid game. In many cases, this just leads into the most quintessential aspects of the Metroid series. The adventure, the exploration, the investigation, the sense of loneliness and isolation. I know everybody thought before this game came out it was just going to be another first-person shooter like Doom or Quake, but, you know, with Samus Aran in it. Nothing could be further from the truth. Well, this is technically a first-person shooter. I mean, it is in first person, and you do shoot things. That's really not the core of the game. Well, don't get me wrong, there was lots and lots of really fast-paced, riveting action in this game. The game is really about the sense of, you know, environmental storytelling that the environments convey, the world building, the navigation, reading the different Chozo and pirate logs, sort of slowly but surely discovering the mystery of this planet. The mechanics of this game are just so incredible. Just the sense of movement in a 3D space as Samus Aran, just the great L targeting used for lock-on, which was very much inspired by Ocarina of Time and perfectly transitioned, I think, into the 3D first-person Metroid game. Just the boss battles that provided a mix of riveting action as well as being sort of like moving puzzles, albeit relatively difficult ones. Just the epic feel and scope of this game, just the way everything continuously slowly escalates towards a grand crescendo at the end, where you have to fight Meta Ridley and eventually, you know, the titular, you know, Metroid Prime, spoilers. Just the riveting soundtrack of this game, the sort of techno-pop mixed with faux Gregorian chanting that this game has from its opening title screen onwards. Of course, the beautiful, gorgeous environments and visuals. This game just looks amazing. To this day, I'm just astounded by how good this game looks. I mean, yeah, from the technical perspective, it still looks great, but then there's all the little artistic touches like the snow and Phendrana drifts, the rainfall on Samus's helmet. Just the variety of worlds in this game. I just love the sort of sense of melancholy mixed with serenity that every environment in this game has, particularly the Chozo Ruins and the Phendrana Drifts, which are probably my 2 favorite locations in this game. Just everything about this game just came together so well. It's just such a nearly perfect 3D Metroid game on its first try. And yeah, while you can look at a few design aspects that are a little clunky by today's standards, I'm sorry, I just don't care about those things. When playing this game is just such a joy. Like, there are so few games that I just get lost in to this extent and just want to go back to. Just want to replay this game just to get lost in these worlds. Just taking moments to just look around, just look up in the sky, seeing the birds flying above the Chozo ruins, or hearing the beautiful, music in the Frendrana drifts as the snow falls. And, fighting every sort of little monster, the simple yet riveting, fast-paced combat system of this 3D adventure game. It just makes me say, wow. Metroid Prime is it's not just my favorite Nintendo GameCube game, it's one of my favorite video games of all time. It is a darn near perfect 3D transition game, and it's up there with the likes of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time, and Chrono Trigger as my favorite video games of all time. Yeah. This game is just such a glorious masterpiece. And this single-handedly makes all the other games I put on my list are almost equally as great to this, yet the few things that make this game, better, make them so much better. Just all the little design choices that make this game such a riveting masterpiece. Yeah. This is easily the best game of its era. I don't care what anybody else says. I know people will argue with this, but it is. I'm sorry. Yeah, Resident Evil 4 is great, and that would have been an honorable mention, but I only ever played the PS4 version. Yeah, you had games like Halo 2 and Knights of the Old Republic and Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that in Final Fantasy X. And while I'm not bad-mouthing any of those games, there's just no comparison for me as far as just games from that era. This is, to me, the best game of its era. And it single-handedly, if the other outstanding games on this list weren't enough, makes the Nintendo GameCube, the little purple lunchbox that could, one of my favorite video game consoles of all time. I'm so happy you watched this video. I love my GameCube so much. And with that, I think I'm going to go play some Metroid Prime. Merry Christmas. Can't wait to talk about Lord of the Rings. Bye.
That's all, folks.